My brother rose from his seat in the courtroom and shouted, "She's nothing but a broke veteran." The sentence detonated in the silence, sharp and humiliating, echoing off marble walls and polished floors. I didn't react. I didn't argue. I just stood there, letting my own family try to erase me in front of strangers wearing suits and badges. Years of service reduced to a single insult. Then I moved. I walked straight to the judge's desk and slid one document across the surface. No speeches, no emotion, just paper. He scanned it once. His jaw tightened. Then he looked up and said, "Close the doors. Everyone stays." That's the moment the balance shifted. Before I explain how a family dispute turned into a criminal investigation, pause for a second. Tap like, leave a comment, and tell me where you're watching from. And tell me, have you ever had to stand alone against your own blood just to protect the truth? When I stepped out of the rideshare that morning, the sky hung low and bruised, pressing down like it expected trouble. The air smelled of wet asphalt and old iron, the kind that clings to your clothes and refuses to leave. The house at 782 Maple Hollow Drive stood exactly where it always had, but something about it felt hollow, stripped of warmth. Same brick walls, same narrow windows, different soul. The porch light flickered above the door, not welcoming, just warning. A metal keypad had been bolted onto the gate, clean and new. So were the locks. A real estate sign leaned crooked in the yard, its edge tapping the post with every gust of wind. I stood there holding my discharge folder under my arm, 23 years of service reduced to paper, medals, orders, proof that I had existed somewhere else while everything here quietly changed. I pressed the intercom and waited. Seconds stretched. Then my brother's voice crackled through, calm and rehearsed. "You shouldn't be here, Mara." For a moment, I smiled, thinking it was a joke that hadn't landed yet. "I just want to see Mom," I said. 5 minutes. Another pause. Longer. "She doesn't want to see you." The words landed clean, without apology. I stepped closer to the speaker. "Open the gate." He sighed. "You left. You vanished. You're not listed anymore." Listed where? I wanted to ask, but I already knew. 10 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up behind me, lights flashing silently. The younger officer studied the documents my brother handed through the gate. "Property belongs to Evan Cole and Patricia Cole," he said. The older officer noticed the insignia on my jacket and softened. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. You'll need to move along." The gate closed with a sharp, metallic snap. The sound lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest. I walked back to the sidewalk and stopped. This was the same concrete where my grandfather once taught me how to count constellations, the same place where he promised the house would always be mine. Now it felt like a memory that never happened. That night, I parked 3 streets away and watched the house glow through the trees. Warm lights, drawn curtains, shadows moving inside, laughing, living. Every window was lit, but none of it was for me. I stayed there until dawn, watching the sky lighten, replaying my grandfather's last words in my head. "Every lie leaves a trail, Mara, even family lies." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. Sitting there in the quiet, I realized the trail had already started, and it was leading somewhere dark. I checked the time on my dashboard clock and laughed under my breath, because exhaustion has a way of sounding like humor. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer, names lighting the screen before fading back into darkness. No one asked where I was sleeping. No one asked if I was okay. The house remained still, protected by paperwork and lies. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, letting the memories roll in uninvited. Birthdays on the porch, coffee with my grandfather at sunrise, promises made without witnesses. By the time the sun finally broke free of the clouds, I understood one thing clearly. If they had gone this far to lock me out, they were hiding more than a house. I sat there until traffic returned, and the street pretended nothing had happened. Commuters passed without looking. Life moved forward, indifferent. That was when resolve settled in. quiet and heavy. I would not beg. I would not shout. I would trace every signature, every transfer, every date they altered. Whatever door they closed would become a record. Whatever lie they told would leave fingerprints. And when I finally walked back into that house, it wouldn't be as family, it would be as proof. The engine hummed softly beneath me as the city woke up, unaware a war had started in silence. I drove away slowly, not defeated, just alert, carrying the certainty that this was only the beginning, and nothing about it would be easy or quick, but I was done waiting for answers. The next morning, I found myself sitting in a diner just off Harbor Street, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and old vinyl seats. The windows were fogged, muting the outside world, which felt appropriate. This was where bad news came to land gently. Claire Morgan was already there when I arrived, hair pinned back, blazer crisped, eyes sharp in that familiar way that meant she'd already seen something I hadn't. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't hug me. She slid her tablet across the table. "I thought you should see this," she said. On the screen was a property listing, 782 Maple Hollow Drive, seller, Ironvale Asset Group LLC. For a moment, my brain refused to process it. "That's not possible," I said. "The house isn't for sale." Claire tapped the screen again, zooming in. The authorization line appeared at the bottom. My name. Clean, precise, signed in black ink. "That's not my signature," I said quietly. "I know, it's forged. The notary tied to it was suspended 8 months ago for falsifying records." The diner felt like it tilted, not enough to knock anything over, just enough to remind me gravity could disappear without warning. So they didn't just push me out, they built an entire paper trail to erase me. Claire nodded. "Your brother's consulting firm is listed as a logistics intermediary, and your father approved 3 of the transfers." The words settled slowly, each one heavier than the last. My own family hadn't acted out of panic or anger. They'd planned, structured, documented. Betrayal executed neatly. I stared out the window at people walking past with coffee cups and headphones, lives untouched by what was unraveling mine. "My grandfather told me the house would be mine," I said, "the day before he died." "Then there has to be proof, an earlier will, an audio file, emails, anything." Something clicked. I backed up his records years ago, before deployment, scanned everything. Claire leaned forward. "Find it." That night, my apartment looked like a storage unit exploded. Boxes stacked on boxes, old uniforms, notebooks that smelled like dust and cedar. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. I finally found the external drive, taped inside an old boot, labeled in my grandfather's uneven handwriting, "Family Archive." When the files opened, I felt like I was breathing again. There it was, the original will, dated, witnessed, signed. And it didn't match the version filed with the court. Their copy was too clean, too smooth, like it had been traced by a machine pretending to be a hand. By midnight, my table was covered in printouts, notes scribbled in the margins. I wasn't just remembering anymore. I was cross-checking, comparing timestamps, following inconsistencies. The next morning, Claire called. "I reached out to someone who can trace the money," she said. "Ethan?" I asked. She paused. "You still trust him?" "He taught me how to read what people hide." An hour later, Ethan was on a secure call, voice steady, laced with dry humor. "You always did find trouble," he said. "Let's see what they buried." Within minutes, accounts started lighting up. Shell payments, dummy invoices, circular transfers designed to look legitimate if you didn't know where to stare. "Your brother moves the money," Ethan said. "Your father authorizes it. Classic internal laundering." My phone buzzed mid-call. Unknown number. "Stop digging." Another message followed seconds later. "We can make this ugly." I didn't reply. I powered off the phone and looked at Claire's name glowing on my screen, then Ethan's. We keep going, quietly, precisely. Because by then, I understood something clearly. They weren't afraid of confrontation. They were afraid of records, and records don't forget. The courtroom felt colder than I expected.
the kind of cold that sinks through fabric and settles in your bones. Marble floors reflected the overhead lights, every footstep echoing louder than necessary. I sat straight on the wooden bench, hands folded, posture drilled into me over decades of service. Across the aisle sat my family, arranged like a portrait meant to project unity. My father stared forward, jaw set. My brother adjusted his cufflinks, calm, confident. They looked like people who believed the ending was already written. When my name was called, I stood. Hearing it spoken out loud felt strange, like it belonged to someone else. The prosecutor began laying out the facts with practiced precision. Forged deeds, altered records, transfers authorized under false pretenses, dates that didn't align, signatures that didn't match verified samples. Claire sat beside me, flipping through notes, silent and steady. She didn't need to speak. The evidence spoke in her place. Then the defense took over, and the tone shifted. They didn't argue the documents. They argued me. They suggested long deployments had damaged my judgment, that time away had blurred my memory, that I was emotionally unstable, driven by resentment rather than reason. They painted me as unreliable, someone chasing ghosts because I didn't know how to come home. Each sentence was designed to chip away, not at the case, but at my credibility. I kept my eyes forward. Then my brother stood. "She's just a homeless veteran," he said loudly, his voice cutting through the room. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Whispers, shifting bodies. The judge struck the gavel for order, but the damage had already landed. I felt eyes on me, measuring, judging, deciding what version of me they preferred to believe. I didn't respond. When the judge asked if I wished to approach, I nodded and stood. The folder felt heavier than paper should, like it carried the weight of every lie stacked on top of it. My steps echoed as I crossed the floor, each one deliberate. I placed the folder on the bench and slid it forward. "Your Honor, this contains the original deed, verified through federal databases, along with an audio statement recorded by my grandfather 6 months before his death." The judge opened it and began to read. The room went still. No coughing, no shuffling, just the quiet rustle of pages turning. I watched his expression change slowly, giving way to focus, then something sharper. He looked up once, then back down, reading again as if to confirm what he was seeing. He set the papers down and reached for the gavel. "Secure the courtroom. No one leaves." The sound of the doors locking echoed louder than the gavel strike. My brother's face drained of color. My father finally turned his head, the certainty in his eyes cracking. The judge spoke again, his voice firm, controlled. "These documents indicate a forged transfer, falsified authorization records, and misuse of identity. The signature comparisons do not align with verified exemplars." No one objected. The defense attorney leaned toward my father, whispering urgently, but he didn't respond. He just stared ahead, shoulders stiff, as if holding himself together through force alone. My brother swallowed hard, his earlier confidence gone. For the first time since this began, the room belonged to the truth. The judge recessed the court, but no one moved. The air felt thick, charged, like everyone was waiting for permission to breathe again. Deputies stood by the doors, hands resting near their belts, eyes alert. My family sat frozen in place, the image of unity finally shattered beyond repair. For years, silence had protected them. Now, silence worked against them. When proceedings resumed, the judge addressed the room slowly, deliberately, as if every word needed to land exactly where it belonged. He outlined the discrepancies one by one. The forged notary seal, the mismatched timestamps, the financial transfers routed through shell companies tied directly to my brother's firm. Each point tightened the net a little more. My father's attorney stood to speak, voice measured but strained. He requested time to review the materials, suggested procedural errors, asked for consideration given family circumstances. The judge didn't interrupt. He let the words hang, then shook his head. "Family does not exempt fraud," he said. That sentence felt heavier than everything that came before it. The court ordered a formal investigation. Assets connected to the disputed property were frozen. Financial records were subpoenaed. My brother was instructed to surrender his devices for forensic review. When the deputy stepped closer to him, I saw real fear for the first time. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. As the courtroom slowly emptied, Claire leaned toward me. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly. "I know," I replied, "but beginnings matter." Outside, the sky had shifted to late afternoon gray. Reporters clustered near the steps, microphones already raised, questions spilling over each other. I walked past them without stopping. I'd spent enough time being examined, interpreted, reduced to sound bites. The truth didn't need my commentary. It had documents now. My phone buzzed as I reached the sidewalk. A message from my father. "We never meant to hurt you." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked the phone and slipped it into my pocket. Intent didn't erase action. Apologies didn't undo planning. That evening, I returned to the house. The front door opened with the same creak I remembered as a child. Dust hung in the air, untouched corners holding years of neglect, disguised as preservation. I walked room to room, slowly, running my hand along familiar surfaces. The mantel where my grandfather kept his medals, the window where he used to sit every morning, coffee in hand, watching the street wake up. In his study, I found the chair exactly where he left it. I sat down and let the quiet settle. For the first time since the trial began, there was no urgency, no next move demanding my attention, just space. I thought about how easily I'd been dismissed, reduced to a label: homeless, veteran, inconvenient. They'd assumed those words made me invisible, powerless. They were wrong. Survival teaches patience. Service teaches discipline. Loss teaches clarity. The investigation would take months, maybe longer. There would be consequences, hearings, negotiations behind closed doors, but the story had already shifted. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was being heard. As night fell, I stood and opened the window. Cool air filled the room. Somewhere down the street, a door slammed. Life continued, indifferent to courtroom drama. That felt grounding. I didn't win because I yelled louder. I didn't win because I demanded sympathy. I won because I kept records, because I remembered, because truth, when documented, doesn't need permission to exist. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough.
6 years. 8 years. 10. No early release. The judge's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The gavel came down once, clean and final. The sound echoed through the courtroom, and still no one spoke. I watched my father's back curve inward, like the weight finally found him. My brother stared straight ahead, blinking too fast. My sister's lips parted, but no sound came out. The handcuffs clicked softly as deputies stepped forward. Not violent, not dramatic, just final. When they were led away, my sister turned once, eyes glassy, searching for something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe acknowledgement. I didn't look back. Some endings don't need eye contact. They only need distance. As the room emptied, an older man stood from the back row, a veteran, judging by the way he carried himself. He nodded once, slow and deliberate. "They can't erase us,"
he said under his breath. I nodded back. That was enough. Outside, the air was cold but steady. I walked down the courthouse steps holding a thin folder, papers that had cost me years of silence, but returned something more valuable: my name. They called me a homeless veteran, but you can't lose your home when it's built on truth. The story traveled faster than I expected. By morning, headlines spread across local feeds. Veteran exposes long-running family fraud. I didn't read past the first line. I didn't need the details repeated. The verdict had already said everything. 6 years for falsified records, 8 for laundering through shell accounts, 10 for orchestrating it all. No parole. The numbers were fixed now, unmovable. My mother didn't speak during sentencing. Outside, she stood wrapped in a coat that looked too big for her. She reached out, then stopped. Her hand hovered, uncertain. I didn't know, she whispered. I met her eyes. Maybe not, but not knowing isn't the same as not seeing. I didn't argue. Some truths don't need defending. They only need daylight. A week later, I returned to the house for the last time. The gate stood open, police tape fluttering against the fence. The garden was still alive. Flowers my grandmother planted years ago pushed through soil hardened by neglect. I knelt and brushed dirt from the leaves. I kept my word, I said quietly. I followed every lie back to its source. I didn't keep the house. I donated it to a veterans foundation. Let someone else rebuild there, someone who still needed a place to begin again. That night, I stood near the water. The sky was heavy with gray and silver, the horizon wide and honest. I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't proving anything. Justice didn't shout. It settled. They said I was homeless. I wasn't. I was just unwelcome where I helped build something, and sometimes that cuts deeper than any wound. But I learned this: home isn't a deed or a last name, it's the truth you refuse to bury. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what truth you'd stand up for. And subscribe, because the next story might be closer than you think.